A massive 2-decade longitudinal study followed over 135,000 adults. And they didn't just look at their habits for a year or two.
No, they tracked this sprawling cohort across 20 entire years.
Right. And what they found about cancer risk, well, it should absolutely stop you in your tracks if you were listening to this.
It is a staggering revelation.
It really is. They found that people who consistently practiced a specific cluster of daily lifestyle habits reduced their overall cancer risk by up to 61%.
61%, yes.
I mean, compared to those who didn't, 61% is not a small margin.
It requires us to completely recalibrate how we think about aging. In the realm of clinical epidemiology, a 61% reduction is not a marginal improvement.
Right. It's not a slight statistical edge.
It is a chasm. When you apply that percentage to a population level, you are talking about the literal difference between receiving a devastating, life-altering diagnosis and walking out of a routine checkup with a clean bill of health.
For hundreds of thousands of people.
Exactly. And the longitudinal scale of the study, the fact that it spanned 20 years, gives us a level of statistical concrete that you simply cannot derive from short-term observations.
Which brings us directly to our mission for this deep dive into the source material. We are exploring the clinical experience and the research of Dr. Richard Ben.
Yes, an oncologist and cancer prevention researcher with 27 years in the field.
He has dedicated his entire professional life to looking at the dividing line. Why do some people develop malignancies after age 50, while others sail into their 80s and 90s with pristine cellular health?
And the material we are analyzing today is intensely specific. We are moving far beyond those generic, exhausted platitudes we have all been subjected to.
Right. We're not here to vaguely suggest that you eat right and get some exercise.
No. We are going to examine the precise underlying microscopic cellular mechanisms that make that 61% reduction a biological reality.
We are looking at the actual hardware of your cells.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are outlining Dr. Ben's clinical protocol.
These are 5 zero-cost, non-prescription habits.
And they are tailored specifically for bodies over 50. So to you, the listener, I want you to treat this deep dive as your own personal biological toolkit.
These aren't just 5 random tips pulled from a lifestyle magazine.
Yeah, definitely not. As we'll uncover over the next hour, they build synergistically. They interlock to support one singular, highly potent master mechanism.
We will count them down, starting with habit number 5.
And we will end with a final habit that Dr. Ben considers the single most powerful intervention available to modern humans.
We begin with the most tangible, unavoidable, daily interaction you have with your biology, what you consume.
Right. Habit 5, eliminating ultra-processed foods.
Food is rarely framed correctly in popular culture. It is not merely caloric fuel.
No, it's biological information, right?
It is a dense set of molecular instructions that you are feeding into your cellular machinery every few hours.
And to understand why this matters so much, we need to talk about what Dr. Ben calls the tired spell checker of your cells.
That is a very apt clinical analogy.
I want to try to visualize the scale of what is happening inside the human body here. Every single day, hundreds of billions of your cells are dying and replicating.
Yes, they're dividing, copying their DNA, and replacing themselves.
The human genome consists of roughly 3 billion base pairs of DNA.
And every time a single cell divides, it has to copy all 3 billion of those letters perfectly.
Which is an unimaginable task. Picture a vast, sprawling library where billions of books are being hand-copied by scribes every single second of your life.
Naturally, through sheer statistical probability, there are going to be transcription errors. A molecular typo here, a missing base pair there.
But in a healthy body, you have a built-in proofreading department.
Correct. It is a highly complex cellular mechanism called DNA mismatch repair.
I picture these mismatch repair enzymes sliding along the freshly copied DNA strand. They're scanning for bulges or kinks where the letters don't line up correctly.
And when they find one, they physically cut out the typo and paste in the correct letter.
They catch the errors before they become permanent mutations. And critically, before those mutations can compound over time and turn into tumors.
These mismatch repair enzymes are essentially the unsung guardians of your genome.
Specifically, we're talking about protein complexes known as MUT and MUT-TL, right?
Yes, MUT and MUT-TL. They coordinate to identify and excise these errors. But here is the critical problem.
And this is an unavoidable reality of biological aging.
It is. After you cross the threshold of age 50, the efficiency of those DNA repair enzymes naturally declines.
They literally get tired.
The clinical research indicates their efficiency drops by roughly 30 to 40%.
So your body becomes a significantly less reliable proofreader at the exact moment in your life when you need it most.
Precisely. Because decades of cellular wear, tear, and environmental exposure have accumulated the most errors right around that age.
The timing is brutal. The moment you need the proofreader the most, it starts taking long lunch breaks.
Which is where we need to connect the diet piece.
Right. How do ultra-processed foods fit into a microscopic DNA repair process? Why are the packaged crackers, the sugary drinks, and the processed deli meets the specific villains here?
It comes down to the chemical byproducts they force your body to manufacture.
Ultra-processed foods, and by this we mean industrial formulations.
Exactly. Foods manufactured with ingredients you would never find in a home kitchen, emulsifiers, modified starches, inverted sugars.
And these accelerate the breakdown of your cellular proofreader.
They do this by flooding your tissues with compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGs.
I have heard of AGs in the context of skin aging and wrinkles, but how are they forming from a packaged snack?
The process is called glycation. When you consume highly processed, easily digestible carbohydrates and sugars alongside industrial fats, you get massive spikes in blood glucose.
And in the bloodstream, these excess sugar molecules aggressively bind to proteins and lipids.
Yes, and they do this without the regulatory presence of an enzyme. They literally crash into proteins and fuse with them.
Which creates an advanced glycation end product.
Correct. These are stiff, malformed, highly inflammatory molecules. They act like biological shrapnel.
Biological shrapnel. That paints a deeply concerning picture. So they aren't just passively floating around causing general inflammation.
No, they actively and directly impair your already weakened mismatch repair enzymes.
How exactly?
These AGEs can physically cross-link with the repair proteins. They change their shape.
And if a MUTS protein changes shape, it can no longer grip the DNA strand properly to scan for errors.
Exactly. The AGEs are essentially throwing sand directly into the delicate gears of your cellular proofreading machinery.
Wait, I have to push back on this. Because the conventional wisdom in the health space always circles back to weight.
I understand where you're going with this.
Is it really the chemical composition of the food? Or is it just that ultra-processed foods are incredibly calorie-dense, you overeat them, you gain visceral fat, and the resulting obesity is what actually drives the cancer risk?
That is the dominant narrative, yes. And it sounds perfectly logical, but the latest clinical data absolutely refutes it. Yes. There was a major study designed specifically to decouple ultra-processed food from obesity.
And what did they find?
They found that ultra-processed food consumption is independently associated with a 28% increase in overall cancer mortality.
Independently associated, meaning weight wasn't the deciding factor.
The vital revelation from the regression models was that this risk remained statistically significant even after controlling for body mass index, controlling for smoking history, and controlling for baseline physical activity.
So a thin person eating a diet of processed snacks carries this elevated risk.
They do. It is not about the weight. It is the food itself actively disabling the genetic spell checker.
The food itself is the mechanistic driver.
Yes. And if we want to look at specific organ systems, another massive cohort study followed nearly 200,000 adults.
They meticulously tracked dietary intake, correct?
They did. And they found that diets highest in ultra-processed foods carried a 32% higher risk of developing colorectal cancer.
A 32% higher risk.
And a 19% higher risk of breast cancer compared to cohorts eating primarily whole foods.
Those numbers are staggering. But let's bring it down to the human level. The source material outlines the case of Dr. Ben's patient, Sandra.
Yes, Sandra. She is 58, works as a school administrator.
And she came into the oncology clinic terrified because her older sister had recently been diagnosed with colon cancer.
What immediately struck the clinical team about Sandra's profile is that her diet wasn't a caricature of bad health.
It was aggressively normal.
She described her daily intake as typical. She wasn't eating deep-fried fast food for every meal.
Right. She had a bowl of processed flake cereal for breakfast. She brought a processed turkey deli meat sandwich on commercial white bread for lunch.
Her afternoon snack was packaged crackers with processed cheese and maybe a diet soda.
She was just consuming standard, modern convenience foods, the things that line the center aisles of every grocery store in the country.
But when Dr. Ben ran her blood work, the internal landscape was alarming. Her inflammatory markers were sky high.
Specifically, her C-reactive protein, or CRP, and her interleukin-6.
Yes, IL-6. Both were significantly elevated.
Furthermore, she had recently had a screening colonoscopy,
Mhm.
and the gastroenterologist had flagged persistent low-grade mucosal inflammation throughout her colon
Mucosal inflammation in the colon is a prime environment for cellular replication errors.
because the tissue is constantly irritated, right?
Yes, it is constantly turning over cells to heal, while the DNA mismatch repair system is being battered by the AGEs in her diet.
It is a biological powder keg.
It is, but this is where the clinical intervention becomes fascinating. Dr. Ben did not put Sandra on an extreme, punitive starvation diet.
No, the intervention was psychologically manageable but chemically profound.
Over a 12-month period, Sandra was instructed to simply replace her ultra-processed staples with whole food alternatives.
She swapped the processed morning cereal for whole rolled oats.
She swapped the deli meat for leftover roasted chicken or legumes. She used olive oil instead of industrial seed oils.
There were no complex calorie calculations.
None. And we have to look at the physiological outcome.
After 1 year, her CRP levels, the primary systemic inflammation marker, dropped by 44%.
Her interleukin-6 normalized completely.
But the most incredible objective data point came from her follow-up colonoscopy.
Yes, the gastroenterologist documented a complete reversal of the mucosal inflammation.
The tissue was pink, healthy, and calm.
By simply changing the molecular information she was giving her cells, she pulled her localized biology back from the brink.
It speaks to the sheer resilience of the human body. When you remove the continuous influx of advanced glycation end products.
When you stop throwing sand in the gears.
Right. Those DNA mismatch repair enzymes can actually catch up on their backlog of work. They can clear the board.
The body desperately wants to heal. It just requires the physiological space to do so.
So the takeaway for you listening right now is a matter of tactical implementation. Do not attempt to overhaul your entire pantry in your entire life overnight.
We have decades of behavioral psychology showing that radical overnight shifts fail.
The protocol Dr. Ben advocates is to substitute exactly one ultra-processed item per meal with a whole food equivalent.
Your packaged protein bar becomes an apple and a handful of walnuts.
Your flavored sweetened yogurt becomes plain yogurt with fresh berries.
It is not deprivation. It is a tactical deployment of cellular defense.
And that mechanism transitions us perfectly into the next phase of the protocol, Habit 4.
Because if Habit 5, eliminating the ultra-processed foods, reduces the inflammatory smokescreen in the body and lets the spell checker work.
Habit 4 is about deploying your internal security force to aggressively hunt down the mutated cells that inevitably slip through the cracks.
Because errors will still happen.
Habit 4 is sleep architecture.
When most of us think about our sleep, we think about it purely in terms of daytime fatigue.
We think about whether we need a second cup of coffee to get through a 2 o'clock meeting.
But Dr. Ben frames sleep in an entirely different paradigm.
He views it as an active, aggressive cancer-fighting mechanism called immunosurveillance.
Immunosurveillance is a highly descriptive clinical term. Your immune system is not just there to fight off the common cold.
It is equipped with specialized lethal entities called natural killer cells, or NK cells.
NK cells are fascinating.
I'd like to picture them as the bouncers of the bloodstream.
That is an incredibly accurate analogy. They don't need a specific antibody to recognize a threat.
They just patrol the tissues, checking the biological IDs of your cells.
And if they encounter an early-stage cancer cell that's trying to set up shop and multiply, they bind to it.
They inject it with toxic proteins and take it out before it can ever establish a tumor microenvironment.
They release proteins called perforin, which literally punches holes in the target cell membrane.
Wait, they physically puncture the cell.
Exactly. They puncture it and then inject enzymes to trigger apoptosis.
Programmed cell death.
Yes, they are an elite, merciless internal security detail.
But here is the critical mechanistic link. Natural killer cell activity does not just happen at a constant rate.
No, it is almost entirely regulated by the architecture of your sleep cycles.
Specifically, the deep, slow-wave sleep stages. I need you to break down what slow-wave sleep actually means for the listener. What is physically happening in the brain and the body during those specific stages?
Sleep is not a uniform state of unconsciousness. It is composed of cycles. Stages 1 and 2 are light sleep.
Then you descend into stages 3 and 4.
Which are characterized by very slow, high-amplitude delta waves in the brain. This is slow-wave sleep.
And this dominates the first half of your night.
During this profound state of nervous system deceleration, your body releases a massive cascade of specific cytokines.
These are signaling proteins, right?
Yes. and they directly amplify the production, the proliferation, and the lethal activation of those natural killer cells.
So slow-wave sleep is the factory production line for your internal bouncers.
Exactly.
So if you aren't getting the slow-wave sleep, the factory shuts down.
Precisely. And here is the terrifying biological reality for the over 50 demographic.
Due to a combination of calcification in the pineal gland, flattening of the daily cortisol rhythm, and changes in brain structure.
After age 60, the proportion of slow-wave sleep your body naturally generates drops by approximately 50%.
Half. You just lose half of your manufacturing capacity for the very immune cells that hunt developing cancer.
Your baseline cancer surveillance system is effectively running at half capacity, unless you actively, intentionally, and rigorously work to protect and optimize the sleep you do get.
Let's look at the clinical data on what happens when you don't protect it. There's a deeply unsettling study that took healthy adults and restricted their sleep to fewer than 6 hours a night.
Not for a year, just for 1 week. 7 days of short sleep.
And they found that this brief intervention dropped natural killer cell activity by an astounding 70%.
A 70% reduction in your primary tumor defense system in just 168 hours.
And when we zoom out to look at chronic, long-term sleep deprivation, the epidemiological landscape is incredibly dark.
Consider a major meta-analysis that aggregated 27 distinct studies.
Encompassing over 2 million participants.
2 million people provides an undeniable sample size. It leaves no room for statistical noise.
They found that chronic short sleep, again, defined as consistently getting fewer than 6 hours in adults over the age of 55, was associated with a 40% increased risk of breast cancer,
A 36% increased risk of prostate cancer,
and a staggering 55% increased risk of colorectal cancer.
The lack of immunosurveillance allows early-stage malignancies to cross the threshold into clinical disease.
I want to dive into the case study of Robert, because his story mirrors so many driven, successful people.
Robert is 63, a retired structural engineer.
He is the classic guy who wears his lack of sleep as a badge of honor.
He spent his whole career priding himself on functioning perfectly well on 5 to 6 hours of sleep.
He wasn't overweight, he never smoked, he played tennis. On paper, his lifestyle looked healthy.
But his latest colonoscopy revealed a high-risk precancerous polyp.
Because his sleep architecture was chronically fractured and compressed.
His NK cells were sidelined. He had essentially fired his security guards decades ago.
So Dr. Ben intervenes not with a pharmaceutical, but with a rigid, non-negotiable sleep hygiene protocol.
And it is highly specific. Bedtime is precisely 10:30 p.m.
There is complete environmental light and device darkness after 9:00 p.m. to allow natural melatonin production to peak.
The bedroom temperature is forcefully dropped to 67 degrees Fahrenheit.
Because core body temperature must drop to initiate slow-wave sleep.
Yes. Annie starts taking a specific magnesium glycinate supplement to support central nervous system relaxation.
We must look at the physiological turnaround documented in Robert's file. Within 8 weeks, not only did his total sleep duration increase to a sustained 7.5 hours,
but his objective wearable sleep tracker data showed that his time spent in deep, slow-wave sleep had doubled.
he completely reversed the age-related decline.
And the blood work verified the wearable data. His natural killer cell count increased by 38% in just 2 months.
He rebuilt his immune response simply by sleeping in a cold, profoundly dark room.
He restored the biological environment necessary for that cytokine release.
The critical takeaway for the listener here is a concept sleep researchers refer to as anchor sleep.
You need to forcefully anchor your circadian rhythm.
You do not achieve this by focusing obsessively on the minute you get into bed, which often just creates sleep anxiety.
You achieve it by waking up at the exact same time every single morning.
Wait, even on a Sunday. If you've had a late dinner on a Saturday night, you still wake up at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday.
Absolutely. Your morning wake time, combined with immediate exposure to bright light, anchors your biological clock far more powerfully than your evening routine.
You set that alarm, and you do not negotiate with it.
When you stabilize that morning anchor, you build a consistent sleep drive throughout the day, which forcefully invites that deep, slow-wave sleep back into your life at night.
You put those NK cells back on nocturnal patrol. Okay, so we've fixed the genetic spell checker by removing the AGEs from our food, and we've deployed the security guards by securing our slow-wave sleep.
This brings us to habit 3, purposeful movement.
Because once you are actually securing deep sleep, you will finally have the baseline metabolic energy to move.
But I want to be extremely careful with our terminology here. The word exercise carries immense psychological baggage.
For many over 50, it sounds like a heavy obligation. It conjures images of sweating in a crowded gym.
We need to reframe this biologically as purposeful daily movement.
The distinction in language is vital. We are not discussing athletic training or cardiovascular endurance for marathon running.
We are discussing the utilization of mechanical movement as a highly targeted biological intervention.
And the primary metabolic target in this context is a molecule called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1.
And its cellular counterpart, a tumor-suppressing protein called P53.
Here's where it gets really interesting. IGF-1 is exactly what it sounds like. It is a powerful growth hormone.
When you are a child or an adolescent, IGF-1 is your best friend. It drives the growth of bone density, muscle mass, and organ tissue.
But after age 50, when your body is fully grown and should be focused on maintenance and repair, if your IGF-1 stays chronically elevated, it essentially acts as fertilizer for cancer cells.
It broadcasts a continuous signal to everything in the body to keep proliferating, including any rogue malignant cells.
And we must ask, what physiological state causes IGF-1 to remain chronically elevated in modern adults?
It is sedentary behavior, the complete absence of mechanical stress on the musculature.
Sitting at a desk, sitting in a car, sitting on a couch.
Exactly.
So the obvious question from someone listening who might be 65 years old and dealing with osteoarthritis in their knees is, do I need to be grinding away on a treadmill for an hour a day to lower this fertilizer? Because if so, that's a non-starter.
The clinical science is wonderfully forgiving on this point. No, you do not need a gym.
Moderate, consistent movement is entirely sufficient to lower baseline IGF-1 levels.
But more importantly, that same moderate movement simultaneously upregulates the activity of P53.
In the field of cellular biology, P53 is universally known as the guardian of the genome.
It functions as your cell's most powerful internal emergency brake.
When a cell starts mutating, or when its DNA is damaged by a toxin, P53 senses the damage, slams on the brakes, and initiates cellular arrest so the mismatched repair enzymes can work.
And if the damage is too severe, P53 triggers the cell to destroy itself.
So physical movement actively engages the cellular brakes.
Let's look at the numbers. A monumental study tracked over 186,000 adults.
They found that accumulating just 150 minutes of moderate movement a week, which breaks down to a mere 20 minutes a day, lowered the risk of developing colon cancer by 42%.
And lowered the risk of breast cancer recurrence by 38%.
But the most profound, paradigm-shifting data point for anyone who believes they are physically incapable of exercising comes from a study examining populations who simply broke up periods of prolonged sitting.
They introduced an intervention of taking a 5-minute casual walk every single hour.
That minuscule interruption of sedentary time reduced blood markers of tumor-promoting inflammation by 27%.
No gym, no sweating, no special footwear required whatsoever.
Just 5 minutes of standing and pacing to clear circulating lipids and glucose.
Which brings us to the clinical file of Eleanor.
Eleanor is 71. She is a breast cancer survivor, and she lived with the daily paralyzing fear of recurrence.
But she also suffered from severe osteoarthritis in her hips. Traditional exercise was completely off the table.
She couldn't jog, she couldn't ride a stationary bike, she couldn't lift weights.
So Dr. Ben's clinical protocol was engineered around exactly what she was capable of executing safely.
They built a specific, low-impact movement routine. It consisted of a 20-minute brisk walk immediately following breakfast.
She was instructed to stand up and do light stretching while watching television in the evening.
And crucially, she incorporated those 5-minute walk breaks every hour while she was sitting and reading in the afternoon.
And the clinical results are astonishing. At her 12-month follow-up, her circulating IGF-1, the cancer fertilizer, had dropped by 23%.
Furthermore, her oncologist noted improved natural killer cell counts.
She completely altered her internal biochemical environment just by walking, standing, and pacing.
And I want to dig into a specific detail of her routine. There's a biological reason they position that 20-minute walk right after breakfast, isn't there?
Yes, the timing of the movement leverages a very specific physiological mechanism.
Clinical data proves that post-meal walking specifically and dramatically suppresses postprandial glucose spikes.
When you walk after eating, your contracting muscles require immediate energy. They use a transporter called GLUT4 to pull glucose directly out of the bloodstream.
And this happens completely independent of insulin.
Correct. This simple action drops post-meal blood sugar spikes by up to 33%.
And we know definitively from the literature that chronically high blood glucose independently fuels cancer cell metabolism.
So the actionable takeaway for you, the listener: you do not need to purchase an expensive indoor cycling bike.
You don't need heavy kettlebells.
Yeah.
You need to commit to starting with a 20-minute brisk walk immediately following your largest meal of the day.
You just open your front door and walk for 10 minutes in one direction and 10 minutes back.
By doing that, you are actively draining the circulating IGF-1 fertilizer from your bloodstream
You are flattening your glucose curve.
and hitting the P53 stop button.
And I want the listener to notice the layering synergistic effect occurring here.
You are lowering the systemic growth signals with movement, while your optimized slow-wave sleep is actively hunting down rogue cells.
While your cleaner whole food diet is reducing the inflammation that obscures those cells from your immune system.
This brings us to a critical juncture. Habit 2. Strategic stress regulation.
Because physical movement helps manage those physical growth signals. But what happens when the mind is constantly racing?
I have to address the elephant in the room here. In a lot of medical and corporate circles, stress management is dismissed as this soft, esoteric wellness buzzword.
It sounds like something you do at a day spa, not a clinical intervention for oncology.
But biologically, Dr. Ben views stress regulation as a hardcore, non-negotiable medical intervention.
And the oncology community is increasingly recognizing that he is entirely correct to do so.
Chronic psychological stress is rapidly emerging as one of the most insidious, underdiagnosed drivers of cancer pathology after age 50.
We have to strip away the essential oils and the wellness connotations and look at the actual measurable molecules involved.
Primarily, we are talking about cortisol.
Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. It is the central alarm system.
And it is important to state that short-term acute cortisol release is a biological masterpiece.
It is an evolutionary adaptation that kept our ancestors alive. If you are being chased by a predator, cortisol instantly floods your system.
It diverts energy away from long-term projects like digestion and immune function and pushes all available glucose to your skeletal muscles so you can run or fight.
It is highly adaptive for survival. But modern life doesn't feature temporary predators that go away after 10 minutes.
It features chronic, relentless, inescapable stressors, unresolved childhood trauma, profound grief, ongoing financial anxiety, the 24-hour news cycle, social isolation.
So the alarm gets stuck in the on position. The sirens are blaring 24/7.
What does that constant bath of chronic cortisol actually do to our cellular cancer biology?
It initiates two very devastating downstream effects. First, chronic cortisol directly suppresses the genetic expression of BRCA1 and BRCA2.
You have likely heard of these genes in the context of breast cancer. They are your two most critical DNA damage repair genes.
When cortisol levels remain artificially high, glucocorticoid receptors enter the nucleus of your cells and physically block the transcription of these repair genes.
Your body essentially turns off its highest level genetic repair mechanisms because it thinks you are in a temporary physical crisis.
Let's make sure that is absolutely clear.
The stress you feel from your mortgage or your email inbox literally silences the specific genes that are trying to fix your mutated DNA.
Yes. It is a direct molecular suppression, and the second effect is equally dangerous.
Chronic cortisol upregulates an inflammatory signaling pathway known as NF-kappa B.
Nuclear factor kappa light chain enhancer of activated B cells.
Okay, walk me through what NF-kappa B actually does in a precancerous cell, in plain English.
The NF-kappa B pathway broadcasts a signal that tells damaged, mutated cells not to die.
Usually when a cell suffers severe DNA damage that it cannot repair, P53 will force it to undergo apoptosis.
It falls on its sword, destroying itself for the good of the entire organism.
But NF-kappa B promotes extreme resistance to apoptosis. It forces precancerous cells to stay alive, ignore the self-destruct signals, and continue replicating.
So your daily chronic stress is literally putting a biological shield around the very mutated cells your immune system is trying to destroy.
And the clinical data backing this up is incredibly robust. A recent study found that chronic psychological stress reduced the activity of tumor-attacking lymphocytes by 48% in adults over the age of 60.
And then we have a massive meta-analysis that looked at nearly 500,000 participants.
500,000 individuals tracked over time, and the findings were stark.
Adults who exhibited clinically elevated markers of chronic stress had a 43% higher risk of developing hematological cancers, such as leukemia and lymphoma.
And a 31% higher risk of lung cancer compared to the low-stress control groups.
This raises a highly complex issue regarding how we individually assess our own stress levels.
Because very often, the biological reality of our nervous system does not match our conscious perception of our mood.
That is a fascinating point, and it is perfectly illustrated by David, the 66-year-old retired executive from Dr. Ben's files.
David comes into the clinic. He has just retired after a high-pressure 40-year career in finance.
He is spending his days playing golf, tending his garden, and he explicitly tells Dr. Ben, "I'm finally relaxing. I feel great."
But his salivary and blood diagnostics are screaming that he is in crisis.
David was suffering from a severely inverted cortisol rhythm.
In a healthy human, cortisol peaks sharply in the early morning to wake you up and provide energy, and it gradually drops to near zero by late evening so you can achieve slow-wave sleep.
Davy's rhythm was entirely backwards. His cortisol was flat and low in the morning, leaving him groggy, and it spiked aggressively at night.
He had developed a condition called allostatic load.
Allostatic load, meaning the intense stress of his corporate career had physically and permanently imprinted on his biology over decades.
Even if he wasn't currently feeling conscious anxiety on the golf course, his nervous system was still bracing for impact.
His BRCA1 expression was measurably suppressed.
Because the damage was structural, the intervention had to be deeply physiological, not merely psychological.
Dr. Ben didn't just tell him to cheer up or send him to a spa.
He was prescribed a rigid, daily physiological protocol to retrain his autonomic nervous system.
He was prescribed exactly 12 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing every single morning using the 4-7-8 pattern.
He was also prescribed a 15-minute evening walk with absolutely no phone or audio input.
And a mandatory weekly dinner with a group of friends to combat the subtle biological stress of isolation.
And the clinical result. At the 6-month mark, David's cortisol rhythm normalized.
The morning peak returned, the evening drop returned.
But more importantly for his oncology profile, his NF-kappa B, that specific pathway that keeps cancer cells alive, dropped by 31%.
His oncology team saw improved lymphocyte counts across his entire panel.
He achieved this genetic repair just through structured breathing, walking, and socializing.
Because he utilized mechanical respiration to chemically signal to his body that the emergency was over. The alarm was turned off.
For the listener, the takeaway here is incredibly accessible and completely free. You do not need a psychotherapist on retainer or an expensive meditation app subscription to start.
You need 12 uninterrupted minutes.
The 4-7-8 method. Let's explain the mechanics.
You inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4 seconds.
You hold your breath for a count of 7 seconds.
And you exhale completely through your mouth, making a whoosh sound for a count of 8 seconds.
Why does that specific ratio work?
The prolonged 8-second exhale is the key.
When you exhale slowly, you stimulate the vagus nerve, which acts as the primary braking system for your nervous system.
The vagus nerve releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which physically slows your heart rate and shuts down the sympathetic fight or flight response,
shifting you into the parasympathetic rest and digest state.
A controlled study proved that this minimal dose, just 12 minutes of the specific breathing daily for 8 weeks, drops salivary cortisol levels by 26%.
You are literally breathing your way to genetic repair.
And
again, notice the interconnected synergy.
When you lower your evening cortisol, you remove the primary biochemical suppressor of your slow-wave sleep.
So Habit 2 directly enables Habit 4 to work better. Every single intervention supports and amplifies the others.
Which brings us to the grand finale of Dr. Ben's protocol, the master lever.
Because all these previous habits, fixing the food to remove AGEs, anchoring the wake time to protect NK cells, purposeful post-meal movement to lower IGF-1, and dropping the cortisol alarm, they are all essential prologue to Habit 1.
This is the single, unified biological intervention that Dr. Ben stated he would choose if he were forced to prescribe only one thing to every patient over 50.
Habit 1, time-restricted eating. And we need to be extraordinarily precise with our definitions here.
This is not a trendy weight loss fad. This is not about restricting calories to fit into a pair of jeans.
This is a highly specific biological protocol with documented, undeniable, clinically verified anti-tumor mechanisms.
So we must examine the mechanism. Why does meal timing matter to cancer risk?
Dr. Ben points directly to a cellular process called autophagy. It comes from the Greek words meaning self-eating.
Self-eating sounds intense, perhaps even destructive to a layperson. But biologically, it is an intensely efficient, life-saving process of renewal.
When your body enters a fasted state, which typically occurs somewhere between 13 and 16 hours after you have swallowed your last bite of food, it activates a deep, internal diagnostic and cleanup cycle.
Deprived of external nutrients, your healthy cells actively begin to identify, dismantle, and recycle damaged cellular components for energy.
This includes misfolded proteins, defective, exhausted mitochondria, and critically premalignant mutated cells.
I want to use an analogy to make this concrete. It is like an enormous office building.
Think about how a corporate building operates. The nighttime cleaning crew simply cannot come in to vacuum the floors, wipe down the desks, and empty the trash cans if the workers are sitting there at their desks 16 hours a day.
Constantly demanding coffee, creating paperwork, and generating trash.
The building never ever gets cleaned. The garbage just piles up until the environment becomes toxic.
That is a flawless analogy for cellular metabolism. The continuous presence of circulating nutrients from food is the equivalent of the workers at the desks.
The process of digestion, assimilation, and insulin management requires so much energy and biochemical focus that the body simply cannot run its autophagy cleanup protocol while it is processing incoming nutrients.
The biological switches, specifically the mTOR pathway, which senses nutrients, are turned on for growth.
Which inherently turns off the autophagy cleanup crew.
And here is the aging factor we must confront. In healthy younger adults in their 20s, this cleanup cycle triggers fairly easily.
But after age 50, due to metabolic inflexibility, your natural baseline autophagy efficiency drops by 40 to 50%.
And we violently compound that natural age-related decline with our modern, convenience-driven lifestyle.
We exist in an environment of 24/7 hyperpalatable food availability.
The average modern adult eats breakfast at 7 a.m., grazes throughout the day, eats dinner at 7 p.m., and has a snack while watching TV at 10 p.m.
They have a 15-hour eating window. Their digestive system never rests.
They literally never enter a fasted state long enough for the cleaning crew to even turn on the lights, let alone take out the mutated trash.
And when damaged cells and misfolded proteins are not cleaned up, they accumulate in the tissues.
Accumulated cellular damage is the foundational biological substrate of cancer.
But if we simply compress that eating window, the clinical results are staggering.
Look at the clinical data from a study tracking adults who restricted their eating to a consistent 10-hour window for 12 weeks.
Meaning they fasted for 14 hours every night.
They showed a 34% reduction in IGF-1, our tumor fertilizer.
And a 29% reduction in CRP, the systemic inflammatory marker.
And they saw a measurable, objective upregulation in blood markers indicating active autophagy.
But the real mic drop study here, the one that should change medical guidelines, is a 2022 clinical trial that followed 218 adults, all aged 55 to 70.
They put them on a 14.10 protocol, meaning they fasted strictly for 14 hours and ate all their normal meals within a compressed 10-hour window.
There was zero calorie counting. No macronutrient restrictions, just time restriction.
The transcript of the results from that trial should be taught in the first year of every medical school.
Without losing weight, these older adults saw a 37% reduction in markers of oxidative DNA damage.
More profoundly, they saw a 41% improvement in tumor suppressor gene expression.
The specific genes that fight cancer literally became 40% more active purely because the patients stopped constantly feeding their digestive system for 14 hours a day.
Let's look at Michael's clinical story to make this abstract biology real.
Michael is 61, a high school history teacher. He came to Dr. Ben with a terrifying history of precancerous colonic polyps and a heavy family history of pancreatic cancer.
He wasn't overweight, he ate decently well, but what was his routine?
A large coffee with heavy cream at 6 a.m. while reviewing his lesson plans.
And a late bowl of cereal or crackers while grading papers at 10 p.m. He lived in a perpetual 16-hour eating window.
When Dr. Ben ran his specialized diagnostics, Michael's blood work showed that his autophagy markers were among the lowest the clinic had ever measured for a non-obese patient.
The cellular cleaning crew had been locked out of the building for years. The trash was piling up in the form of colonic dysplasia.
So the prescription was not chemotherapy. It was a simple, rigid, 14-point known protocol.
His first caloric intake, his first meal or coffee with cream, was moved to 8 a.m.
His last bite of food was swallowed by 6 p.m. Outside of that 10-hour window, he could have pure water or plain, unflavored black coffee or green tea.
Absolutely nothing that triggers a metabolic or insulin response.
The initial adaptation was difficult for him, as his body had to remember how to burn stored fat for energy in the evening.
But within 90 days, his fasting blood glucose dropped from a pre-diabetic 108 into the deeply healthy low 90s.
But the true Life-saving victory was documented in his 12-month follow-up colonoscopy.
He had complete, total resolution of the low-grade dysplasia that had been present in his last two scopes. His gastroenterologist was stunned.
Because Michael's body literally dismantled and recycled the precancerous cells. His measured autophagy biomarkers increased by 53%.
By simply giving his body 14 hours of physiological silence every night, he turned his suppressed cleanup crew into an elite microscopic strike force.
The implementation for you listening is extraordinarily straightforward. You establish a 10 to 12-hour eating window, and you fiercely, unapologetically protect it.
If you put cream in your coffee at 7 a.m., your kitchen closes for the night at 7 p.m. That is a 12-hour window.
If you don't eat your first meal until 8 a.m., you finish your dinner by 6 p.m. No late-night snacks. No handful of almonds at 9 p.m.
Your body does the heavy lifting of cellular repair while you sleep, but only if you get out of its way.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this deep dive. Why does Dr. Ben consider time-restricted eating the master lever?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of our biology, time-restricted eating is the central thread that ties the entire clinical strategy together,
When you compress your eating window, you naturally lower your circulating insulin.
which directly lowers IGF-1, amplifying the effects of your purposeful movement.
You completely stop late-night digestion, which drops your core body temperature faster, protecting your slow-wave sleep architecture.
Meaning your NK cells can deploy at maximum capacity.
The fasting state helps regulate your morning cortisol rhythm, supporting your stress management.
And it drastically reduces systemic gut-based inflammation, giving your DNA mismatch repair enzymes a fighting chance, even if your diet occasionally includes an ultra-processed food.
It is a breathtakingly complex, beautifully integrated machine. So let's recap this biological strategy because we have covered a massive amount of scientific ground today.
You ditch the ultra-processed foods to remove the AGEs and fix the genetic spell checker.
You anchor your morning wake time to protect the deep, slow-wave sleep that arms your natural killer security guards.
You walk for 20 minutes after your largest meal to drain the IGF-1 fertilizer from your bloodstream.
You practice 12 minutes of 4-7-8 breathing to switch off the cortisol alarm that's actively suppressing your genetic repair genes.
And finally, you compress all your eating into a 10 to 12-hour window to let the autophagy cleanup crew dismantle the cellular damage.
And the most urgent, hopeful message from Dr. Ben's decades of clinical oncology experience is this: it is never, ever too late to change the environment of your cells.
The clinical data we discussed today, the 61% overall risk reduction, the reversal of colonic dysplasia, the doubling of NK cells, these clinical trials were not looking at 30-year-old Olympic athletes with pristine genetics.
They were looking at normal, stressed adults in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who had accumulated decades of cellular damage.
And who physically, measurably reversed it through targeted, disciplined lifestyle changes. Cellular plasticity remains throughout your entire lifespan.
Your cellular destiny is not fixed. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you digest all of this.
When you look closely at all these mechanisms, the biological necessity for fasting, for daily movement, for profound darkness during sleep, for whole foods, for nervous system calm, you realize something deeply concerning about the way we live now.
Modern society functions as an almost perfect, frictionless machine for dismantling our body's natural cancer defenses.
We are constantly surrounded by 24/7, hyper-palatable, highly processed food.
We are bathed in melatonin-destroying blue light until midnight.
We are trapped in sedentary jobs that rot our muscle tissue, and we are steeped in chronic, low-grade, inescapable anxiety.
We have inadvertently engineered a world that is fundamentally chemically hostile to our cellular biology. We are living in a zoo of our own making, and the diet is wrong.
Exactly. Which means that adopting these 5 habits isn't just a casual health kick or a New Year's resolution.
It is an act of profound daily rebellion against modern convenience. You are taking your biology back from a system that is destroying it.
So what does this all mean for you?
As you look at your routine tomorrow morning, which of these 5 habits are you going to reclaim this week?